So in this workshop, we're going to discuss everything about instructional design and course development given the time that we have. Okay? So the objectives for this workshop, to discuss the principles of instructional design, the steps in instructional design, and develop an instructional plan. So one of you commented earlier na may output. So siguro sanay sa outcome-based education. So in the workshop, we will try to go there, and I hope that we will be able to come up with at least the beginnings of an instructional plan. So kung natapos nyo, then well and good. And the 4 is to define a framework in selecting resources. So as I said, this one really plays a big role in content development in ODEL. And last is plan for course materials development. So for those who are here that are administrators and are more interested not in coming up with a particular course, but how to implement course development, we have a separate workshop for you. So we can divide the group later into 2 workshops. So a workshop outcomes, instructional plan, and a content development plan. So we've done this already. So let's launch into the instructional design. So what is instructional design? So I'm sure all of us have our ideas of instructional design. What is analysis of frame condition, analysis of learner characteristics, formulating learning objectives, and what are the kinds of e-learning scenarios? So this is the coverage of the instructional design lecture. So here is a diagram of what is instructional design. So normally, if you really are starting with a new course, it's possible that you're doing it the linear way, the first time that you're doing a course, right? So it can be that you're going from analyzing to defining learning outcomes, structuring the content, selecting resources, learning activities, then assessment, and so on. But it's also possible that you can do it non-linear. So especially if you've done this before, but you're doing it with another set of learners, or you came up with a new sets of resources. So that's why there are also many many arrows connecting these elements. And I think the best indicator also of a good teacher is the ability to be able to adapt, right? To the kind of students that you have and learning context. What else? If there are resources, especially nowadays, anong meron tayo? There's so many information out there, right? In the internet. So, where else? Where do you get this? Parang ang daming information. But how do you really sift through those resources? So, of course, you can take a look at this. You can already focus on what are your objectives, right? But also, there must be ways of really looking into resources. How do you select resources that would match effectively your learners and also your learning objectives? So these, I think, are the crucial skills that an instructional design should have. Okay? So if you are a course developer, so all these elements you should master, so that it's easier for you to be able to come up with a course material at the end. If you are a course administrator, you'll be more interested in this framework for instructional design. And that is, syempre, no? So you have planning. It's actually basically the same, but there are other additionals. So frame conditions, learner characteristics, the learning content objectives, learning scenarios and methods. Development side is what is the type of media that you're using, what are the learning activities that you are developing, are you considering interactivity and tutoring, implementation, how are you going to manage the course, what are the technological requirements and the tutoring requirements, and in terms of evaluation, what are the formative and summative evaluation. So the first diagram was more on really coming up with the content. But this one includes already the implementation, or how do you manage the course. Both of them are important, so that's why we included both of this framework in this presentation. So we'll go through some of these elements now. So when you say frame conditions, so this is actually one aspect is needs assessment. I think lahat naman tayo teachers dito. So we're familiar with this. So when you say needs assessment, is there really a need for learning? And is that problem or issue can be improved by training or by education? So what we're trying to point out is we have to assess first, is there really a need for learning? Baka naman it's a policy issue, or is it a program that has to be instituted? But we always need to be very careful that there is a learning component. There's a need for learning in this scenario. And in many cases naman, there is always a need for learning. But we have really just have to focus that the answer that we're giving through training is really answering the issue. Okay, so that's why we say frame conditions are very important. So if the issue can be improved by improving knowledge, skills, or attitude. So ito naman yung ating mga domains of learning, di ba? So we have the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor. So this would help us in assessing if there's really a need for learning. And then we go to the purpose of the course. So if you have ascertained, yes, there is a need for learning because because we can improve skills or attitude or skills, then what is the objective of this course? So that's the next question that we ask, right? And what else? Where will the learning take place? How much time is allotted to the learning and what media will be used? So these questions, if you are in an academic setting, parang given na yan, right? Because the students are there for a purpose. So they are already enrolled in a particular subject. So you actually don't have to even think about the purpose of the course kasi nasa syllabus na-approve ng system, right? But if you are doing a continuing professional education or you're doing a technical vocational course specifically designed for a particular job, so then you will really have to go through these steps. What about learning environment and conditions? If you are in an academic setting, what would you say? Fix na yan, ma'am, kasi nasa classroom kami. So there is the learning environment. But that's one consideration also. I mean, if you're conducting a training, for example, venue is a particular issue. That's why you are being asked to evaluate venue. Pero more than a physical space, we also have to think of what is the space where learning will take place. So marami rin yan, especially in ODEL, it's more of, you have to imagine where your learners are. So where are they coming from? So is it possible even to conduct a blended learning? So, kasi blended learning means that mayroon pa ring time ng face-to-face. So if they are based abroad, will the blended learning work? So these are considerations. And how much time is allotted to learning, considering that they are, if you are doing postgraduate programs, chances are your students are fully employed. So how much time is allotted for learning? So do we really think that our students will have enough time to read the 1,000 books or references that we give them? So anyway, these are just general questions. And then just to keep this in mind when we really go into the planning. So what media will be used? So this is another question. So even before we design the course, so we already need to consider, so what type of media or medium do we have? So what are examples of this? So in your school, maybe, ano bang meron tayo? So mostly books, right? So especially if we're coming from a residential. We have books, what else? Books lang. We have videos, we have CDs, we have modules, so print form pa din. So what other resources do you have in your schools? You have computers. You have a very good internet connection. You're not in the Philippines. So do you have a stable internet connection, high bandwidth? Then these considerations that can help you also in designing your materials. Why? Because you can come up with, let's say, a CD-ROM courseware. highly, what do you call this? Yung multimedia. So there are a lot of animation. So parang, but then if you consider how do you distribute that now to your students if you're doing it online, then you will have to really look into issues of bandwidth, whether your students will have their own machines uh, where they can read or browse through your materials. But anyway, I will not discuss this in detail because this is specific content later. Resources, so financial, personnel, material resources are available to develop the course. So this is for the administrators who are here. Again, this is an issue yesterday. So how do we encourage our faculty to develop materials? Because that's another difference between residential and online distance e-learning. You need the materials to be ready before the course begins. So, di ba sa residential, usually you give them references and then you prepare your lecture like what, an hour before the lecture starts. So, but in Odell, all the material should be prepared before the start of the course or the semester even or the training or the workshop. And how many faculty now can you commit to doing this, to writing? How do you compensate them for writing this? Will this be part of their teaching load? Or will this be an extra work for them with honorarium? So, and what about staff? Who can help you in the course development? So we can also talk about them. Will you need instructional designers? Will you need graphics artists, multimedia specialists, language editor, layout artist? Actually, you will need all of them if you really are into serious development of online course materials. So many, some institutions, what they're doing, actually even UPOU, we don't have a big office. So actually, ang office that I'm currently overseeing is a small office. So we only have, we don't have an in-house instructional designer. We only have a layout artist. Meron kaming graphics artist. May multimedia specialist pero among the faculty, not in the office. Instructional designers, not in the office alone, but also faculty members. So it's a bit of a talagang flexibility lang. So you need to think of ways of, can we give you a course load as a project development associate for you to be able to do multimedia, for example. Or sometimes it's being asked as a teaching load. So, but if you have the resources, you can hire personnel. It's still best that you have all these members of the team in the course design, in the course development. So to be able to come up with course materials for Odell. So okay, what about analysis of learner characteristics? And I think we've already started on many of this. Age, sex, alam na natin to kasi we're all teachers naman. But maybe what we have to emphasize is most often the ones who are taking Odell are mature students. So why? Chances are they're already working full-time and they don't have the time to go to the school in residential, face-to-face, wherein there's a scheduled time. That's why they would opt for online. I think kahit naman tayo, di ba? So if you want more training or exposure, chances are you will look for online courses kasi you don't have the time to go to the school physical. So what are the assumptions? So they're probably more mature. So we hope, may mga UPOU students ba dito? So we hope that they're more mature. So sometimes they're not. Second is because they're at the work, so they also bring with them their work experiences. So even the learning activities that we give them in the course design has to be authentic. So dapat it's really based on actual scenarios and not too theoretical. There should be immediate application of what they're learning in the course. Kasi that is what they need and that is what they can relate to. Academic degrees, I think we understand this. Profession, of course, but maybe what is not emphasized yet, or we are not so aware of is marami ng mga cross-pollination. So maybe hindi na yung, unlike before na if you're in this field, yun lang yung pag-aaralan mo. But now you come across with students who are coming from different disciplines and profession. So it's really actually very interesting when you go into these classes online and you find out that your students are coming from not only different geographical areas, different work settings, but also coming from different professions. So the discussion can become very rich if you can harness yung where they're coming from. Learning situation, so voluntary participation, who pays the tuition, time available, learning site, family. I think these are given naman even in the traditional courses. What else? Prior knowledge and learning habits. So I think these are also similar to what we already know. Okay, so expectations and attitude. So motive for participation, content-related interest, personal learning objective, attitude towards learning. So these are again not really different from what we usually encounter or what we usually do in face-to-face. Actually, medyo malayo pa tayo. So I will try to look into this kasi hindi naman to bago sa inyo. Formulating learning objectives. So we already know about this, cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domain. But fine-tuning learning objectives, so just a review. So we can actually use this mnemonics, parang ABCD. So make sure that we know who our audience, who will do the behavior. What is the behavior? So what should the learner be able to do? What's the condition? Under what conditions do you want the learner to be able to do it? And the degree, how well must it be done? So this is an easy way of making sure that your learning objectives is really focused and smart. No? So it has to be student-centered. You have to break down the task and focus on specific cognitive processes. Should use action verbs and should be measurable. So you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, I'm sure, and yung kanyang list of verbs. So with this, then you can have this as guide when we go to the instructional design workshop later on. So example of an ABCD. So you can say after going through this module, the learner should be able to formulate a detailed plan for delivering a course online that integrates constructivist learning principles. So the condition there is, after going through this module, so after reading or after attending a session or after performing something, the learner, which is the audience, should be able to formulate a detailed plan for delivering the course. So that's the behavior that integrates constructivist learning. So that's the principle. So that's the degree. Okay, so what about e-learning scenarios? So this is just a diagram that will show us the different types of learning scenarios. So you can have an offline. So there's no use of telecommunication devices. So para kay ma'am na walang internet, nasa na si ma'am? Ayun, nagkakape. So if you don't have a stable internet, then maybe you can do computer-based training, but then you will need computer stations where your students will go and where you can distribute your course materials. But if you have an internet connection, you can have an online, and you can have I made two forms. It can either be synchronous or asynchronous. I think alam na natin to, diba? So when you say synchronous, the use of mga chat facilities, video conferencing. So kung mahilig kayo mag-Skype, mag-Google Hangout, you have money, you can buy Adobe Connect. So you can have chat with your students. You can actually simulate a face-to-face session where your students can see you at the same time. So kahit you're in different geographical locations. Or you can do it asynchronous. So if you have students coming from different time zones, it's so difficult to have one common time for chats. But what will probably help is you have discussion forums wherein they can just log in when they can, as long as they have the tasks that they can look into, and they have materials that they can read whenever they have the time. And what we've been saying earlier, the blended learning, wherein you have the combination of online and face-to-face. Okay, so that's the instructional design. Now, Ling will give you the content development, uh, and then we will have the workshops later. Unless you have questions now on instructional design. I think natanong na nila lahat. Sige, Ling.
So content development. So we discussed instructional design, now content development naman. Paano siya nagkaiba? So remember, Vice Chancellor Lumanta mentioned yesterday in the plenary session na there are three things that she wanted everyone to remember. It was the hardware, the organizational framework, and manpower. So this is what we will be discussing. Aside from instructional design, you have to figure out the hardware, organizational framework, and manpower. Hence the systems approach to DE, to ODEL. So, sorry. So what we will be discussing today is selecting resources for the content, where to find resources, analysis of learning conditions, target group, organizational framework, technical infrastructure, and then preparation and distribution of materials. So first one, selecting resources. So I'm presenting a table made by Dr. Lori Lard. She is a professor of learning with digital technologies at the University College London. So she developed this framework on how to figure out which media type to use according to the learning task supported or mediated. So first column is media type, second column kung ano yung learning task na ma-achieve niya or na pwede niyong gamitin. Okay. So first row, narrative. The narrative is tasks where learners are expected to apprehend or assimilate information. So examples of those are digital text, video, or audio files. Basically, para siyang yung lecture. So they are linear media. And it presents only the teacher's ideas, terminology, or instruction, not the learner's reaction or reformulation of them. So, pinapresent nyo lang with the narrative. So, what kinds of web tools or resources? Web pages, ebooks, slides, PowerPoint, animation. So, that's the narrative media type. The next one is interactive. So with interactive, they allow students to make their own links and follow their own discovery. So exploratory or investigative siya. And generally with this kind of media, may feedback from the media, yung user. So what kinds of media is this? It's digital, no wait. It's hypertext, or simply the World Wide Web, and simple learning objects, search engines, hypermedia, gateways, and portals. Adaptive media is more elaborate learning objects, simulations, and virtual environments. So Second Life, other simulations, models, interactive tutorials. So with this, they get to practice more of what they've learned. So experimentation and practice, and the medium continuously adapts to user input. It gives the learner significantly more control over their interaction with the learner experience. Learner can experiment with changing the parameters and can see what happens when they try to put their new learning into practice. So that's the adaptive media. Next. Communicative. So these are chat, video conferencing, instant messaging. So this is communication between the teacher and the student or among the students. So it provides an additional source of learning content in the form of information and ideas and enables feedback, thus supporting reflection throughout the learning. So we will provide this in our handouts po. The last one is productive media. So here, they produce their, parang they apply their learning and they have some kind of output. So what are these? Maybe web pages, word processing tools, if you have them make an essay, image processing tools, audio and video capture. They can blog about their learning experience or have a group make a wiki and shared write draw systems. Yes. So for the productive, these are tasks where students articulate or express their understanding by generating or constructing their own representations. So that's the table of resources for which media type you would use for a specific kind of learning experience. All right. So, now we go to analysis of learning conditions. Diniscuss na po to ni Ma'am Sheila. The target group, you need to figure out who your target learners are and you find out their sociographic data, media skills, prior knowledge, where will they learn, how much time can they put into learning, and all that. Okay, next. Organizational framework. So, you need staff, money, and time. So for staff, hold on. For our staff, would you need an instructional designer? Of course, you would need an instructor. The instructional designer would design the courses, or do you need technology experts, technician to take care of your equipment, the administrator to take care of the blended learning program or the online program? Support staff for the students, for the registrar to schedule your courses, language editor. Uh, the librarian can also provide support and evaluation specialists to make sure your courses are of quality, and a graphic designer or multimedia specialist. So these are the staff that you would have to think of to get for your program. And then next is money. So where do you get the money where will the money come from for implementation of your program? Do you increase your tuition? Do you add a premium to the students? Do you add a technology fee kung wala pa kayong technology fee sa inyong mga tuition? Or do you get a grant from CHED or TESDA? So I think that's a policy framework that each school would have to figure out. Tapos sa time, like for if you're gonna do blended learning, so how much time do you dedicate to face-to-face? How much time do you dedicate to online learning? Or you also have to consider how much time do you need to develop. Gaano kahabang oras ang ibibigay nyo sa course developers nyo? 1 semester, 1 year, 1 summer? So, things like that. Dideload nyo ba sila? Or what kind of benefits would your course developers get to develop an online course? So those are things that you have to think about for the organizational framework. And next is technical infrastructure. Things you have to consider are kung may internet connection na po kayo, gaano kalaki po ang bandwidth nyo? Are you going to use an LMS? If so, gagamit ba kayo ng server or will you put it on cloud? Is your server fast enough to handle thousands of users? And then you also have to consider how much data needs to be transferred. So if you're going to do video, ang laki nun. So kung magfo-focus kayo sa video, your internet, your bandwidth needs to be really good. Unless ipopost nyo sa YouTube. So sa YouTube na mag-handle ng bandwidth. So, Choice of storage and distribution medium, that's the same with LMS, or do you do cloud, or do you do CDs or online or print lang po? Do you need to consider, are you going to buy a new server? Do you need new servers, or do you keep the old one? So, ayun po. Preparation and distribution of materials. So when you're content developing, the first thing you have to think of is preparation, or um, the you have to prepare your students first for the start of the course. So you have to give them, they have to know what they're expecting, what to expect at the start of the course. So you have to create the course guide. So you have the general study aids, you show them the structure of the program. Usually we give them, they already know at the start what their assignments are. If there's a final project, they'll know by then, usually, how much time they'll have for each assignment, for each article, for each topic, and some content-related orientation. So, and then the assimilation. Um, for when you, this is for creating mostly the lecture or the content of your course. So you have to chunk topics into separate learning units. And they have to be, usually uh, we recommend maikli lang. Because if any of you are used to usability design, um, users do not like to scroll. They don't like to click more than 3 clicks. Ma-frustrate na sila pag hindi pa nila nahahanap yung kanilang hinahanap. So it has to be short and structured, simple text lang. And then use different multimedia forms so it's more interesting. Then revision. The revision part is where you make sure that the learner does not forget what they had just learned. So you have to use summary, quizzes for self-check, assignments for tutor feedback, make sure they're actually learning what they're supposed to learn, and use discussion forums so that you can they can discuss on their own, create their own learning, reflect on their learning. And then last is distribution. So you decide if you're going to do offline or online, asynchronous, synchronous, blended, or print lang, CD.